Okay, we are back. That's right. It is NFL draft time. Before that, it's free agency in the NFL on the Our Football Network. We're talking Cleveland Browns football today with Fred Greetham from the OBR. You can check out Fred's work on his Twitter handle at Fred Greetham9. There you go. See, he's got his own billboard. I like that. The Orange and
Yep,
Brown Report. How's it going, Fred?
it's going good. Good to be with you, Greg.
Good to have you.
What has
So,
happened?
yeah, the last time we spoke, we were talking about a promising season and why shouldn't it have been a promising season after finally making the playoffs and winning a playoff game, and the excitement going into this season was a high of high. And then it kind of just started. It looked like it kind of went downhill once Hunt got hurt, and there were a few other issues, obviously. We don't need to go. That's not the type of show that we're going to go into today. But the fact is, it was a disappointing season. And the top player we need to talk about before we can go into anything else is Baker Mayfield, because outside of the Cleveland fan base, there's a lot of people wondering how confident the organization still is in Baker.
Well, I don't know. I think it's shaky, to be honest with you. He at this time last year, there's no question he was the franchise quarterback. In fact, that was the time when Aaron Rodgers was talking about wanting to be traded, and I even suggested if you could forego the future, you assured yourself winning the Super Bowl for 1 year with Aaron Rodgers. Would you do it? And a lot of people, no way. That's mortgaging the future. But now the way that looks, it's a question. And I think Andrew Berry and the front office really were. I asked questions at the end of the season. Were they willing to turn over every stone to see, what they could do, to upgrade the position? They said all the right things. They were committed to Mayfield. But the fact that they didn't extend him and he's now going to play on the 5th-year option tells you about all you need to know. But it always comes down to who's going to be available. And one by one, anybody that was maybe rumored to be available, it seems to be drying up. Aaron Rodgers staying in Green Bay. We hear Russell Wilson's now going to be traded to the Broncos. That was one that I thought maybe they could, into. But I don't know what the assets, if the Broncos had more assets than the Browns did, if that's, the case. Kirk Cousins, some about with a new administration, moving on from him. They're committed, sounds like, to Cousins, and Derek Carr to the Raiders. And one by one, most of the options have become available to them. And I don't think they want to go to the draft a quarterback with the first pick and say, hey, you're the starter. So I think they're going to play the 5th-year way it looks right now with Mayfield, and kind of like a prove it year. You do it. Every other year. His rookie year was great. Second year was lousy. Third year was great. Fourth year was lousy. So what is it? I think played a big part, but because he played, you can only go by what you see. And he didn't play very well. And
Yep.
so that's what's everybody's mind. Was it how much was the injury? If you're going to track him out there, but he doesn't play well, then that leaves you with the idea, as Bill Belichick, I can only go by what I see.
That's right.
And he didn't look very well.
Yep.
So quarterback play, to me, big reason why they were 8-9. I mean, they had the best roster I had ever covered in 30 years, and I still say that even at 8-9. And I think it's a quarterback play. And the big question with the quarterback is, can he get the job done at the end of the game? The Browns had 6 chances. 5 of them were with him at quarterback. The last drive to either win the game or put the game out of control with a first down, and they didn't get it done on any of those occasions. And then you watch the playoffs and you see the Patrick Mahomes and the Josh Allen going up and down the field like a video game. I have not seen that play from Mayfield even at its best in 4 years. So that's the question. but you don't move on till you got an upgrade.
Sure.
They've went through 30 quarterbacks since 99. And no question, he's above average. He's better than anything they've had, but he's not. You see all these young elite guys, and he just doesn't seem to be in that category. So that's the quandary.
But heading into this part of the off season, and you just mentioned it with the veterans, I don't even know if there's anybody else available. It doesn't appear to be that case. That's going to be an upgrade over Mayfield now. So if it's left to the draft, is that an option? Or because they decided to not overbid whatever Seattle is going to end up getting from Denver, then that is an indication that at least for this offseason, at least for the 2022 season and this offseason, it's Baker Mayfield, and they're not going to invest a high pick on a quarterback. Does that preclude them from investing a draft pick on a quarterback? Is it possible we might see a day 2 or day 3 quarterback pickup in the draft?
Yeah, you know how it is. I mean, if you think second round projected guy is your franchise quarterback, I don't think you say, well, I hope I can get him in the second round. I don't know what they feel. If they think Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett or somebody is that type of guy, then maybe you take him or you trade up to get him. But from all reports, this isn't that type of a class. There's some good ones, but you don't have the guys that are all up there that are,
No.
hey, there's a no
No.
brainer. This guy is Andrew Luck or this guy is Peyton Manning type of guy. So left with, I don't think free agency, a Mitch Trubisky or somebody, Teddy Bridgewater or somebody like that. I don't think they want to bring in a guy to compete with
Yeah.
Mayfield. It's either he's the quarterback or he's not. And so that way, yeah, they could draft one to develop and hope maybe next year he's ready to go. But I just they feel the roster was built to win now, and you have the window with all these offensive linemen and the two running backs. They know they need to get the wide receivers because they overvalued what Beckham and Landry would do last year, and so defense is ascending. They put a lot of effort into that last year, and you really saw the second half really starting to play well, and you have most of that back. So I really think that, they're just trying to kind of find the best foot forward. And if Mayfield's their best option right now, that's how they're going to do it and deal with it a year from now. If he plays lights out, they give him an extension or they franchise him if they can't, and they, in effect, could have him for even 2 more years. So I think that's the mindset, unless they can turn over something and all of a sudden something comes out of the blue. Like the Wilson thing, if that would have become available and they could have got him, I think they would have.
Sure.
I don't know what their feelings are on Deshaun Watson in that situation, but to me, he's probably the one most likely to get traded. But there are a lot of baggage and things to go with that. So
Yes.
anything could still happen. This group did not draft Baker, so I don't think they are stone cold committed to him. But at this point, you risk alienating him as well if you're out here, bringing in and talking to everybody and trying, things like, well, I want to break up with you before you break up with me.
Yeah.
I don't want to play here anymore. So they're kind of walking that line. They've said everything right. But as it appears, I don't know if they're going to have any better options because they don't have the assets to trade like some of these other teams do in draft picks, and like the Eagles, 3 first-round picks
Yes.
or whatever the Broncos had and so
Well,
forth. So,
apparently the Broncos
yeah,
are going to get rid of a lot of players in this deal, which is what the Browns would probably have to do as well if they're going to pick up maybe a Deshaun Watson, because you hit it on the head. He's the only potential franchise guy left, and we won't know until we find out whether or not he's going to get indicted, and we probably will figure that out in the next few weeks.
so there's a lot of things. So I think they're just moving ahead forward. And as Andrew Berry, said, it's opportunity resources, meaning, yeah, if there's an opportunity, but are we willing to give up throwing out 5 first-round
No,
picks to
that's
get a guy? You
ridiculous.
can
Yeah.
get about anybody if you're willing to give out the
Sure.
resources. So they just have to decide, what is. But I do think they feel that high priority. But is there something better? I don't know if they think Jimmy Garoppolo
Oh,
is a
no, no.
upgrade, or if they think some of the other guys are
Yeah.
upgrades. So you just look at it that Mayfield's health. And, I had that injury. I never got it repaired. It's the most painful thing I've had in my life, and for him to have it dislocated 2 or 3 times, that's got to be playing in the back of your mind that I got to get rid of the ball maybe a split second earlier because I don't want to get dislocated again, even with a harness and all the things in that. But the head scratcher is he kept going out there every week. And so you're like, well, he's good enough to play. He didn't look very good. And some of his decisions were not.
Well, that's the hope. Is that was a big reason why the consistency wasn't there last season, and maybe he can go back to playing the way he looked, or at least his trajectory can go back to the way it was prior to the injury. Okay, so let's stay on offense because David Njoku was tagged, and there was a lot of speculation that he was. Oh, there's just no. If you're looking for a tight end in free agency, there's one because they've signed Austin Hooper to a big deal. They drafted Bryant. So how many top tight ends do you need on your team, no matter how many 12 personnels you're going to run? But apparently the Browns valued David Njoku an awful lot, so they tagged him. And what does this mean to the rest of the tight end class or the unit on the team?
Well, it's kind of interesting. When they signed Hooper, that was the first signing that Andrew Berry did agency 2 years ago. I mean, like at 12:01 on the tampering, he kind of came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting them to go all in on a tight end, especially Austin Hooper. But I do know Kevin Stefanski likes to run 3 tight ends almost all the time. And Yoku immediately through Drew Rosenhaus demanded to be traded. Browns didn't trade him. They actually picked up a fifth-year option. And after being here and playing through the year, he kind of changed his tune last year in training camp. He wanted to stay with the Browns, and he rehired his original agent to get a deal done long term. At the end of the year, in his exit interview with us, he said, I want to spend the rest of my career here. I love it in Cleveland, and so forth. It was a little surprising they didn't get him extended, but I think that's the plan, is him to be the number one tight end. Most people thought maybe they would Austin Hooper after June 1st because his cap hits only like 2 million June right now. He's at 9.5 million. He's been very underwhelming since he's been here. I mean, I even think he's a little disappointed because he caught over 70 passes a year in Atlanta. I think last year he caught in the 40s. He is taking tight end. He's just running 7, 8 yard curl routes and getting tackled. And so, all the way around, but there was a report last night from ESPN that the plan was to keep them both. And I'm a little surprised by that because you have Harrison Bryant, and I think you could release Hooper and another tight end in a four, like a Harrison Bryant,
Yes.
develop him.
Yes.
There you have your three. But so far, they're making it sound like Hooper's a guy I want to restructure with him. I don't know if they could trade him, but so that's where that's coming from, is that Kevin Stefanski just loves running 3 tight ends out there. If you look at the top three, their numbers combined, they have the numbers of like a Travis Kelce, 90 to 100 catches with, 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. And it's good because you have it spread out over 3 guys. So if one goes down, you still got 2 other ones. So thinking, but I just figure if Njoku's moving to the top of the depth chart, which I would think they'd try to move on from
But
Hooper.
they also have to now utilize Njoku like a true number one, if that's going to be the case. And obviously that would happen if Hooper's not there. But if for some reason Hooper's still on the team somehow, they restructure his contract, I don't know, then you need to start treating David Njoku like the weapon that he looks like he can become, because that's the one thing that an outside observer I looked at this season, and you see that big game against the Chargers, and you're going, I know you can't have that every week, but can you give me a little bit of that after that one big game? Because you know the guy's got the talent, and then you just don't. It's like you don't even target him. It just doesn't make any sense to the outside observer.
The frustration, I think, and even with my questions to Stefanski at the combine last week was, forget the quarterback play, the injuries, and the wide receivers. Have you done anything schematically to get your playmakers more involved? Speaking of Njoku, to me, even the Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, Ernest Johnson, they were only on the field 4 plays the whole season together. I realized Hunt got hurt and never came back in the game that they started to use both of them together. But you've got to use your playmakers and not just, we just keep running our offense. And like you said, Njoku had 36 catches. He made some, they started throwing the ball, jump balls to him in the end zone, and he was going way over the DBs and making nice catches. He's been inconsistent, but here's another thing I think why they're so invested in him. This is his 6th NFL season.
Yeah.
Turned 25. So you have a 25-year-old who's starting to mature, and he dropped the ball a lot early in his career. The last 2 years, they only had him for 3 drops in the last 2 seasons. How who
Sure.
considers it a drop or not? I can think of times when it seemed like he dropped the ball. But that being said, I think they feel the upside. And at tagging him, I think the tag's 10.9 for a tight end. Last year, the Patriots were paying Hunter Henry and those guys over $12 million, I think. So he realized, I think that's why the contract hasn't been done, because he sees Hooper getting $42 million guaranteed over 42 million over 4 years with 22 million guaranteed. He wants northward of 12, 13 million. And I think they're saying, okay, let's buy time, go out and do it again. And then maybe next year when we moved on from Hooper, then you could get that contract. So I don't know, but I think that's the thinking. There's more upside there. I'm telling you, Hooper doesn't look like he can get open with much separation. He just had no yards after catch. I mean, I don't know what. He just didn't seem like the same guy that I thought they were
Okay, so
getting from
then that
Atlanta.
also trickles into obviously the wide receiver with the passing game. And Donovan Peoples-Jones is another one of these enigmas, because it's like, first of all, he's got to stay healthy. That's the thing. But it appears that the talent is now there, and with more experience, that he can be almost like a number one type guy. But whether you can rely on him or not, that's the big question. And Jarvis Landry, what's his status? How much longer do you expect Landry to be around? But either way, wide receiver is a major need for this team, isn't it? It could very well be their first pick at number 13.
Yeah, it's on offense. That is really the whole focus is over bringing back the whole receiver room or overhauling it. There's only 3 under contract right now. Peoples-Jones, Anthony Schwartz, their 3rd-round pick last year, and Jarvis Landry. But most people here expect him to be released.
Okay.
He's got a $16 million salary for this year, and he isn't playing like a $16 million guy. He's been great to turn around this franchise. But last year he played through some injuries, but his yards after catch and even balls, he dropped a couple. He fumbled against the Steelers on a potential game-winning drive, and he dropped the 4th down pass. I think they want to renegotiate, but he does not want to. This is the last year of his deal, and I think the dead money is only like 1.5 million, so they can cut him and save $15 million. So that's really, I think, what's going to happen because I've been told he will not restructure or take less, this year. And so it's kind of like, okay, good luck. Go out and see if you can find that
Yeah.
elsewhere. I would rather them not until they have a better option. But right now, to me, he would be at best your third receiver, a slot guy. I think Peoples Jones is going to be the number two. I agree. I don't think he's ready to be a number one. They need a number one. And when year they overvalued the return of OBJ. He never wanted to be with the Browns, and coming off the ACL, he just never really wanted to be here, and it
Yeah.
showed. And it derailed the Browns season. A lot of people, at the Super Bowl made it sound like, oh, this is, the Browns threw OBJ to the street. That wasn't. He orchestrated his way out of Cleveland with his dad putting out that video, embarrassing the quarterback and the team. That really derailed the Browns season. I mean, it wasn't going that great, but they were still in the hunt at that time. And that just under the radar. So anyway, have to get a number one receiver. I would. I have heard they're going to be very aggressive in free agency.
Okay.
But I know until they declare who has been franchised, what always happens, the guys that are targeted at the top are all
Yeah.
franchised. So I don't know if they're going to have many options, but they would rather get a veteran that they know can plug in immediately. And then even if you draft one 13th overall, he doesn't have to be the man. There's not too many that do the Jamar Chase thing in their rookie year. It's sometimes you think you wonder if that guy's a bust, and all of a sudden they really blossom. And I don't think they want to rely on the 13th pick if that's what they do to be their number one receiver. But they might have to do that because free agents might not want to come here now because of what OBJ, the way he badmouthed the team with the Von Miller, saying don't go to Cleveland type of thing. Who knows? Money speaks, but they are going to overhaul the room. And I think it'll be a mix of draft picks as well as free agents. Might be even maybe not the top free agent, but maybe those middle guys that are top 10 available, somewhat in there. That he likes to get those 25, 26-year-old guys that are coming off their first contract with their other team that for whatever reason maybe didn't blossom. So
I know that
maybe
Jamison
gonna
Crowder, a good slot receiver, is going to be a free agent for sure. But as far as that number one guy, so if they go and they sign a receiver that they believe can be a number one or trade for, who knows? Does that mean that you believe that they'll probably add the receiver in the draft, but it won't be with the 13th pick? The only way it's the 13th pick is if they don't get a bona fide top receiver in free agency. Do you think that's how that plays out?
do. I think that the draft. I usually focus more on free agency than I do on the draft at this point because that's going to dictate.
Yes.
If they go out and get a top edge rusher, or able to, or decide to transition or tag Jadeveon Clowney or whatever, that takes the need of an edge rusher immediately off the table, and you can go all in on wide receiver. But if you get a wide receiver, then it might be the edge
Yes.
rusher in the draft.
Yes.
And so that's where it's all going to come into play. Like I said, if you have them in the draft, you have them for at least 4 or 5 years. Whereas in free agency, you might not get them. You might say, I want, Allen Robinson, but he might not come here. And then you're stuck.
Sure.
And so it's all about you can, I think you're going to see free agency, wide receiver and edge or defensive line. And whatever they don't come up with front is what they would make the move in the draft.
And speaking of edge, so Clowney, as you mentioned, what do you think his chances of coming back?
Well, he's a mercenary, and in talking to him at the end of the year, he sounds like he expects to get paid because he finally had a big year. He'd had 4 straight years, 1 year deals with other teams. I don't know if the Browns are willing to pay, 2, 3 years, $50 million on the table. I've heard. for him. I don't know if they would transition tag him to let him go set the market and then match it if they wanted him. Again, I think he's going to do what he's been doing is just kind of shop around. He did mention he likes the warm climate. He did mention Miles Garrett said, I've been trying to recruit him a couple, and I just get the reading between the lines that he's looking for the biggest dollar and the best potential climate he can get. And so I don't think he's going to sign right now. He's going to wait and see what's available. So if they want to make sure he's back, they almost need to tag him. Probably be a transition tag at this point.
Okay.
But I think that they only have two defensive ends under contract. Their fallback plan was Takaris McKinley, who they signed to a 1 year deal, a younger guy, and he showed promise. Unfortunately, he tore his Achilles in the Raiders game late in the season, so he might not even be ready this year. So now you only have Miles Garrett and Curtis Weaver under contract at edge. So you have to draft, you'll probably draft one, whether it's in the first round or the second round, one of those I expect. And then you'll probably also go to free agency. If you can't get a top guy, you probably get that 1 year guy to fill in immediately.
Okay, and what about the interior of the defensive line? Jackson's a free agent, and you take a look at their depth chart, and they've got a couple of young guys that they've added over the past couple of years. Are they okay with those younger players, or they definitely have to bring in at least a veteran?
They have to bring in somebody. I don't know if Malik Jackson will be back. He was a 1 year deal. He didn't practice all week because of the knee, and he played on Sunday. So that tells you his knee's not very good. He was 32. Um, the only two they have on the inside under contract are Jordan Elliott, who they drafted in the third round 3 years ago, and Tommy Togiai, who they drafted last year in the fourth round. I don't think either of them are ready to step in and be the man. Um, Big blow in the interior is Malik McDowell. They had a real find there, they felt. Second round, I think 35th overall, the Seahawks, like in 2017, never played, got in trouble. Browns brought him back as a just kind of a chance in training camp. He ended up being the starter, and he played the whole season. Then he had an off the field incident, very unfortunate. And I've been told he's not going to be back. So that means a guy you had at minimum wage that played all the games, you're moving on from him. So you're going to have to get at least one, if not two, free agent tackles, and that could be another guy you draft, an interior guy. So the defensive line is going to be addressed. Wide receiver, those are the three positions. Anywhere on the defensive line or a wide receiver are the top three positions that they're going to address in free agency and the draft.
Do you think then that also opens up the possibility of, because we talk about edge rusher receiver, and chances are one of those two will go with the 13th pick. But do you think it's possible that a guy like Jordan Davis could be almost too good to pass up if they really, really feel that he could be a difference maker with their defense?
Yeah, I think that they've always talked about player available, and if that's the case, if not, they would trade down. If they could get a load, for that. So,
Okay.
but I think they're gonna try to plug those holes in free agency, and then the draft. And what Andrew Berry's done in the past is then, like, after the draft, sign those veterans on 1 year deals,
Okay.
like the Malik Jacksons, the Malcolm Smiths, and so forth. But yeah, I think that he's drafted very well. I mean, in his 2 years, last year, I said with the first pick, if you could get a top line corner at 26, like Greg Newsome, or you could get a linebacker that makes plays like Owusu Koromoa, he got them
Yeah.
both. And they were both all rookie teams. The year before, he got Wills and Grant Delpit in the first 2 rounds. So there's no reason for me to doubt that he's going to get a player at 13. It's just really, I think supplementing it with free
Sure.
agency. They say the defensive end class is deep. Projections with as many as 5 out of the first 15 picks being edge rushers. If that's the case, there might be even some fall down to the second
Yep.
round, or he could trade back up like he did for JOK last year to get one of them, later in the first round. Same thing with wide receiver.
Yep.
There's a lot of a wide receiver. So I think that's where I think those are the hardest ones to find: wide receiver and edge rusher. And so I think that's what the preference is. But when they have players like you're talking about, Jordan Davis, so forth, I don't think they would pass up somebody that they clearly think is a playmaker that makes all the difference in the world.
Okay. You mentioned the 1 year guys. One of those is a free agent again, Anthony Walker. If they don't, first of all, do you think they'll resign Walker?
I don't know. I think they feel they can plug in a linebacker. Here's my read. Jacob Phillips was a third round pick, tore his bicep in like training camp last year, and most people thought he was going to be out for the season. They did not put him on season-ending injury reserve. They put him on the active roster. He actually came back and played like the last 4 games. I think in a perfect world in Joe Woods' scheme, what they want to do is play two athletic run linebackers, and that is JOK and Jacob Phillips. Now, of course, you need others, but I don't think they're going to pay Anthony Walker big money. They might say, "Hey, we want you back for 1 year." He did call the plays, but I think that's really what they want is to play two
Yep.
linebackers and not three. They have a third one like Sion Taki, who is like a first and second down type linebacker. And that's just my feeling, what I saw, because when Phillips came back, it was JOK and him out there almost all the time
Okay.
in passing with 6 defensive backs.
And speaking of that, we know that they need to have three safeties a lot. And so Harrison's a free agent, Stewart's a free agent, but Johnson and Delpit are back. So are they first of all, do you think they're going to bring back Harrison or Stewart, or do you believe that they will probably instead want to target a younger player in the draft?
Well, yeah. I mean, a year ago, I would have said Harrison would have been, ideal. They traded for him, young guy. Um, Season went on this year. He didn't really make a big impact. He got hurt a few times. He got ejected from a game. He got some unsportsmanlike calls. I don't know. I haven't heard much about him. I've heard more about MJ Stewart because he converted from corner to safety this year. And then when they had COVID, he ended up playing corner. He was Mr. Swiss Army knife. And I heard they really wanted to bring him back.
Okay.
Now, I don't know what his options are in free agency. He was kind of one of those high pick, second round pick with Tampa, but been kicked around and pushed around. But he made a late push last year with his utilization. I would say if they can bring one of the two back, it'd be Stewart because he can play corner and safety. And I think they will try to bring him back. I just don't know his demand in the open market. I don't think it'd be that great, but I don't think that they're going to let him go. Or maybe they have, say, something like, "Hey, go look around and come back to us and we'll let us match it," or whatever
Okay.
type of a situation.
Quickly, before I let you go, I know it's not a major need anytime you have Chubb and Hunt in the backfield. And it seems that even when Hunt was hurt, they get some decent production from Johnson, and they did draft Felton last year. Is there any chance that after what happened with Hunt, knowing how important the running back position is to this offense, that they feel they need to bring in a really good young and potential number three, sort of like to compete with Felton, and you can get those guys, on day 3 in the draft.
Yeah, I don't think so necessarily. I think they've got Hunt under contract. The biggest question is Dearness Johnson.
Yes.
There's been a lot of talk. They met with his agents at the combine. Um, I'm pretty confident they're going to tender him.
Okay.
The question is how high. I think a second round is something like almost 4 million. They've put a lot of money into that running back room with extending Chubb and Hunt. But Hunt's up after this year, so I could see them keeping Johnson around and letting him become the number 2 next year. Because you're right, he didn't play until that Broncos game when Chubb and Hunt were both out and had 146 yards on 30 carries, and he ended up with over 500 yards in just his time. And I think they like him a lot. It's just a question: do you tender him at the right of first refusal? A lot of people wondered why in the world he made the team last year. He didn't think they'd keep 4 running backs, but Baltimore, for one, had just lost their 2 running backs, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, to ACLs, and he would have been running against the Browns in the division because he has shown that he's a good running back, and I just think they want to get something for him. They're not ready to let him walk. So whether they sign him, let him get an offer, and then decide to trade him, or they trade Hunt, keep Johnson, I think that he's in their plans one way or the other. I'd be very surprised if they just let him walk.
And Cole Quitt, he's a free agent, right? What's the situation there at punter?
Well, I think he's 40 years old, and so he just stopgap, for Jamie Gillen. I think that you'll have a new punter, and I wouldn't be surprised if a new kicker. That's one of the priorities that I have down. Is the kicking game cost them 4 games last year, and indirectly, and just one of them would have got them in the playoffs. As bad as they played, even the Raiders game, if they'd have won that Raiders game, even with the third string quarterback, they would have been in the playoffs. And they are very aware of that. That Jamie Gillen dropped a snap on the punt against the Chiefs. They were ahead by 10 in the third quarter. That totally turned the game around. They lost that game on the last possession. And there was 3 field goals missed that or played in the game. So I think you're going to see them get a veteran punter and kicker or draft a kicker.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, because look at what happened with Cincinnati and McPherson. Not that you get lucky with one of those guys every year, because it's very hard to find a rookie kicker that could do what McPherson did. But that's what you all look for. That's the thing. I mean, you search for one of those guys, whether it's a place kicker or a punter, until you find one. And when you find one, it's like, whew, I don't have to worry about that position now for the next 5 or 6 years, or maybe the next 10 years. But it's so hard to find. So we'll see if the Browns can, because it's been an ongoing issue, the place kicking position for the Browns for years now. I mean, you could probably go back 20 years. They've had so many problems with the kicking game.
Phil Dawson, you let him go because you said he was too old, and he kicked for like 6, 7, 8 years with Cardinals and the 49ers, and yeah. And it's ironic, he came in with the extension team in 1999, and at the time it was Chris Palmer, because Phil told me that story. He said that he came up to him, they had like 5 kickers in camp, and they go, well, we're going to go with you for now, this week. And it turned into like a 15-year career with the Browns, the most accurate kicker in their history.
Yeah.
And they had some pretty good ones. So, yeah, it's unfortunate, especially when you got a pretty good team. The last thing you want is to lose games because you can't rely on the kicker. It cost them the Packers game on Christmas Day. They had COVID with the kicker that they're probably going to replace, but the second kicker missed an extra point. They had to track and chase that point the rest of the game and lost by 2. So, I think they're really going to address that. But you're right. You can't guarantee that the best kicker in the country in college is going to be able to not get the yips in the NFL. Browns did that with Zane Gonzalez, and he didn't cut it. They had to move on from him. So I think they're going to see if there's a guy like that they can give him a shot again.
Yeah, and I don't really think there is, but that's why it's just a numbers game. I think in this draft, it's just going to be a numbers game. You never know. Maybe one guy works out and you're lucky, but I don't know if any of them will get drafted. It's possible, but because it's not, again, there's no McPhersons in this draft that I can tell at this point. But it'll be interesting to follow the Browns. And by the way, if they go with a veteran, and I'm not talking about like a 35-year-old, is that a possibility that maybe they go out and try to acquire a veteran and they'd be willing to spend a little bit more because it's such an important position for their team now?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there was some kickers that are free agents. I don't have the list in front of me, but one been around a little bit, Young Koo, I think, or something like that from the
Yes.
Falcons. Um, I don't know if they would go for a Nick Folk who's like 36, but there was 4 or 5 kickers in their 20s that Matt Gay was even, a free agent from the Rams, and there was 4 or 5 of them that are out there. I don't know if any will get franchised. That a lot sometimes teams do that, but I think they will look to bring in a veteran that's been there, done that, that can kick in the outdoors. Because that's one of the things a lot of times, even back to Phil Dawson, he was like a weatherman. He knew how to play that wind. It was unbelievable. And so many guys come in here and they don't really know how to handle, the closed end of the stadium or the open end of the stadium and things like that. So I think they will. Punter, there's not much available, but I think that I think they will overhaul that. I cannot imagine they rely totally on a 40-year-old Colquitt, but I think they have that in their hip pocket if they can't find anybody else.
All right, Fred. So what are you working on right now? First and foremost, definitely free agency, correct?
Yeah, I mean that waiting for the tags to officially come out, and then the hit list for what I think the Browns should do. I will say, 2 years, Andrew Berry in free agency has had a specific target, and boom, they become available. As soon as the tampering opened, he announced Austin Hooper, Jack Conklin, and Case Keenum like almost immediately when that 2 years ago. Last year, John Johnson, Troy Hill, so you're going to see, specific targets. If there isn't something announced or leaks out quickly, that will mean they either failed or they just didn't they just weren't able to get the guy they wanted and go after. I expect them, if a couple of these wide receivers are available, to go right at them and get one of them, and maybe the same with their edge rusher. Last year they went hard at Trey Hendrickson. He went to Cincinnati. They ultimately ended up with Clowney, but that wasn't until a little way down the road. So I expect Furious, and then they'll go to the draft.
At Fred Greetham 9. That's where you follow Fred on Twitter. And Fred, we look forward to talking to you when the draft is over, so we can get a really good idea of how the offseason went for the Cleveland Browns. So it's going to be fast and furious, starting with free agency next week and then the draft next month. So I appreciate your time as always, Fred. We'll talk to you in a few months.
Thank you, Greg. It's always fun.
Thank you, Fred.